Yeah. Don't want to make you feel left out, so I'm just
Well,
gonna
yeah,
hide it.
I didn't want to be the odd man out again, unprepared.
All right, Farrell, I think we are ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back. We are back to a three-person panel for this little comic segment that we have for you. This one's not going to be directed towards creative content, but more an industry discussion.
Right.
A lot of stuff has happened over the last few months. We kind of touched upon it a little bit in our talk about Amazing Spider-Man, but there's been a lot of shifting of the chess pieces, I guess you could say, between publications of books, the deals, the distribution deals behind the scene, and what it all means actually for the readers and the retailers out there, and it's been a pretty big impact. So I figured let's kind of start it off and just discuss maybe a little bit about what your thoughts are on how the comic industry kind of came to a screeching halt.
Well, I think every industry sort of came to a bit of a halt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Comics definitely got impacted pretty heavily, more so than some others. Excuse
Wow.
me.
There we go.
Did we get that?
That's going on the blooper
that
reel.
audio, come on.
I was fighting it so bad.
I think if you managed to just kind of let it out discreetly, we probably could have cut that from the audio. But now that
Shouldn't have chugged that Coca-Cola there.
I needed the caffeine.
Oh, that's.
I was like, I can power through this. No, I can't.
So
anyways,
the comic industry is such an abysmal state that it's got you gassy.
I'm literally sick to my stomach.
Sick to your stomach over it. Yes.
Okay, so anyway, no, but a lot has changed since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest change was a change to the way that comics are distributed at the distribution level. Now you have your publishers like Marvel, you have DC, you have Image, your Dark Horse, you have all these different comic publishers who are in charge of creating these properties and hiring the talent out to actually make the product. But then there's the actual distributor that prints out the comics and then delivers them to your local comic shop or whoever that you buy your comics from. For the better part of 2 decades, it's been one game and one game only. That was Diamond Distribution. They were the only company that was distributing comics in printed form. And say what you will about Diamond, a lot of people have troubles. I mean, you've had your fair share of struggles with Diamond. Sure. But in general, I think most retailers think that services and distribution had been running pretty good under Diamond's watch. But then, COVID disrupted so much stuff like it did, and as part of it, DC decided that I believe they had an option with Diamond to renegotiate their contract. And instead of renegotiating, they decided that they were not going to continue using Diamond services at all.
Right, so they opened up their own distribution.
They actually went to 2 other distributors.
Yes, Lunar and
UCS, which is actually Midtown Comics. Excuse me. Yeah.
Or it's I don't know if they're directly under Midtown Comics as far as what how their business org structure is, but definitely the company that owns Midtown also owns this distribution arm, which is, I think it raises a lot of ethical questions about distribution. Now, as far as their service level, I really don't know that much about it. Chris, you're probably a little bit closer to that aspect of it. You obviously had to make that switch at one point from having Diamond be your sole point of purchase for all your comics to having then to set up a new account with, I believe you're using the Midtown? No, you're using Lunar, right?
Originally I was going to use Midtown, but recently we signed with Lunar. Yes.
And what was that transition like?
I want to be careful with what I say here because I don't want to get into I don't want to disparage any parties at all, whether it's any of the 3 distributors. But I will say that if there were other businesses like mine that dealt with the same issues that I did, it's a very painful transition. You know, you have Diamond Comics obviously is a well-oiled machine by and large. You don't realize that until you start seeing the other side, right? And DC using two smaller distributors, especially during a period of COVID where maybe there's reduced workforce, there's all these added complications that you know, companies like Midtown and Lunar have to contend with as well. It's not like they're immune to all the stuff that was happening, and maybe the preventing you know, workforces to come in full force at warehouses. I don't imagine to know what the problems were in the chains, but I imagine everybody's dealing with the same issues. And to have the number of accounts probably around the country go to these other smaller chains, you know, just in a COVID situation, I imagine that they were just ill-equipped to really contend with that, even though it's a big opportunity for them.
It's huge. Like logistically, you think about all the pieces that it takes, you know, to actually get those comics made and then shipped. It's a huge, you know, nationwide, international network that has to be managed, and having all of a sudden like two new players come in. Not only is it disruptive to distribution, but it's also, you know, disruptive to the retailers, like the people that are trying to sell these, because this isn't the only thing that you're dealing with either. Obviously, there's a lot going on, and a lot that you have to change, a lot that you're adjusting to.
Right.
It felt like it was bad timing on DC's part to be like, during the midst of all of this, it's like you're drowning. You know, here's an anchor.
Yeah, it really, you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head, because you know, at the end of the day, you're on the, you know, the battle lines basically, and you're dealing with your existing distribution channels, and they're struggling in their end, and there's a lot of like butting of the heads, and at the end, you know, we're suffering, the customers are suffering. You know, getting the comics into the hands of the people that really want them, you know, they're affected by this.
Sure.
And but really, when it comes down to it, I kind of point my finger at DC, and I say, you know, DC, you know, like, what were you thinking? You know, and you know, and maybe it's like many different industries or organizations. A lot of times there are people who kind of they're in some ivory, you know, towers, and they're not really understanding, you know, what all the effects could be, right? And you know, maybe they did it very knowingly, maybe they didn't, you know, but
who knows how long this has been a part of the plan, you know.
Sure.
Pre-COVID, it could have just very well been like, you know, we're getting ready to renegotiate. This is the direction we want to go in. And then COVID hit, and they were like, you know what, we're going to stay the path.
It also kind of calls into question, what is DC's plan in the long run? You know, maybe not DC, but Time Warner, who owns DC, correct? You know, so
they have made
there's a lot of things at play here, and there could be a lot of motivations behind it. And those things
Time
tend
Warner,
to get
who
discussed.
I believe was recently acquired by AT&T under like a big conglomerate. So
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
A lot of changes.
so that certainly could be. I mean, that certainly could have factored into it as well. Certainly, DC Comics, when you look at the overall market share that each publisher captures, you know, it's Marvel by a wide margin. DC comes in next, and then like you know, Image has their piece too. But it certainly can't be that profitable for them, at least not the print comics. I think even with Marvel, the print comics, I don't know how much of the business is driven through the print comics. It's probably really driven more through, you know, movies, TV deals. I would even go ahead and say like toys and like games and the licensing that comes with those. And you have to wonder if, like, you know, part of this was due to AT&T's, you know, the boards and heads and directors being like, hey, this print comic thing, not really that profitable.
Right.
Is there any way we can like scale back on this? How can we change it up so that like maybe at some point we can kind of just like stop doing this?
I think you're in this industry, you're dealing with two different types of capital. You're, you know, for the IPs. You're dealing with obviously the revenue portion, and you're dealing with the creative portion. And the creative capital, I believe, is still strongly in the camp of the print industry. You know, all the movies being made, the products being marketed are being marketed based upon you know, the creative content that was created by the writers and the artists of these stories.
I totally agree with you, and I think that I think part of it is actually ties into how much of a better job Marvel has been doing about pushing new characters out that like really resonate with fans.
Yep.
You know, they've rebooted characters, they've brought in new characters to take up the mantle of new characters. You have characters like Miles Morales, you know, that has come onto the scene. Huge star, you know, he's gonna get, he's had the Spider-Verse movie.
Yep. Which is excellent.
Which was awesome, you know, and they have all these other characters that they're bringing in that they've expanded their base set of characters to kind of build them out.
Yes.
They build out these character sets.
And they're giving a lot of life to old characters that didn't really have that much life to begin with, too.
So, what do you mean?
So a lot of the back catalog of characters that weren't in the limelight before, especially after the success of Iron Man in the MCU, and then they were able to pour so much energy into his written character and really expand on him, whereas before he wasn't that big of a character.
True.
They have now a base of characters that are starting to move forward and get a lot of their own stories. I mean,
Like even Iron Man was like a B-list character. He was like a garbage character before, you know, Robert Downey kind of revitalized him, and now he's probably one of the most recognizable favorite characters.
I think if you asked any young person today that grew up on the movies but also does enjoy the comics as well, if you ask them, you know, who is the face of Marvel, they would undoubtedly say Iron Man.
Probably Iron Man right now.
Yeah.
And then we have like, you know, like Guardians, I think is another great example.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, B-Team, I think when it was Brian Michael Bendis who came in, kind of brought in that group of like, you know, like Star-Lord and Drax and all these other characters and like assembled them in comics. Like, hey, this is a really interesting team. These are like intriguing characters. Let's see if we could do something. And then like Guardians was just this unbridled, out of nowhere hit due to his, you know, comedic effect. But it came from the print.
Yes.
Now, I think where DC struggles is exactly this, is that what was the last like new DC character that came out that got you really excited? Well, I mean, okay, Tyler,
I do
your
have a
opinion
character. I brought this character up
not
so many times in the past, and I still check to see if they're going to bring him back. But I loved Red Tool. I absolutely loved this total joke character that they brought into the Harley Quinn
They're probably not going to make a
series for
feature-length film.
No, he's never going to get a feature-length film, and I would love to just see him pop up on occasion in different story arcs. That I'd be fine with. But I thought they made him so funny and so interesting, and the way that he interacted with Harley Quinn and the other characters, that it actually made the book fun for me.
It was, yeah.
I was
agreed.
reading. I was
So-
actually buying a DC comic book I think that was every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was a bi-weekly book.
Yeah.
So and they stuck with him for, I think, like
The whole New 52 arc, I think he was, yeah.
I-
They didn't
it
bring him
was-
back on Rebirth.
They
That
did
was-
not bring him back, and I quite enjoyed that character. And then they just, well, he's not getting enough attention, so they swept him under the rug and just continued on with their core.
I mean, Red Tool
Okay.
was kind of he was a bit of
He was
an
never-
anomaly because
yeah.
like he was obviously a ripoff of Deadpool, who
It was
of
a
course
rip-off
a ripoff
of
of
Deathstroke.
Deathstroke,
Which made him so
Right.
hilarious. to
which
me.
the cyclical nature of that was
Yeah.
like, you know, they
That was very
much
clever.
addressed it. It was very funny.
Yep.
But outside of Red Tool, who like can you name like a character that was developed within the last, let's say, decade?
I can't name a DC
Well,
book
since
that
like
I've read
the
in
New
last
52
decade.
started.
The Joker, the
Batman
Batman
Who
who laughs.
Laughs.
The Batman who laughs.
Okay.
That's-
Sure, but you can't
Yeah.
develop a TV show based on. Well, I guess you could. Like Joker movie was really good.
Yeah.
But like a hero, like someone that they would
Sure.
like build a franchise around. Like, is
Right.
there any like group? Is there a team up? Is there a character that they developed that you're like, that person has legs?
I can't think of a thing,
I can't
or
think of a
one
thing either.
character.
So
That they could do that with.
I don't know if that's just
Yeah.
due to like the DC publishing or what's going on or the way the DC fans are wired.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's probably unfair to just kind of lump all DC fans together, but
Yeah, it's just their business model. At the end of the day, this is about these are the editors, right?
They've always
they're,
just
they're
really-
the driving
Yeah.
force behind all the creative content,
Right.
right?
Correct.
Down. So you could have writers. You know, I don't want to be unfair to DC. you could have writers that are bringing great ideas to the editorial board, but we don't know what's happening there.
And that's a good point too, because as part of this big shakeup, one of the big moves that was lost in the shuffle was Dan Didio was released as like chief creative officer of DC, and he had very much a strong hand in sort of guiding the direction that DC's comics were going in. There was going to be the big 5G event where they were going to relaunch all of like DC characters with like new younger versions. Like in this alternate timeline where like all Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, they're old, but here's this like new age of heroes to take the place, like in the vein of like Young Avengers, where we'll see like like Kate Bishop is getting a TV show, right?
Yeah.
Like this is where this, and I think DC was trying to go in that direction, but then like when the pandemic hit, it just seemed like somewhere along the line they said, no, we just gotta stick with what got us here.
Yeah.
Not a time for change.
Yeah, not time.
Right.
But also a time to change how they function in the real world, just
Right.
not with their characters.
Right. But that, kind of going back to my point about creative capital versus the traditional capital that, a business runs on,
Yeah.
The almighty dollar. I think you've got a fair amount of the print side feeding the movie, TV show side, but then it also kind of goes in reverse too. They both feed each other, right? Because you just brought up points where Iron Man, was never a prolific print character, even though he had his own book,
Yep.
Perpetually, but it never reached those levels of like popularity that one would think, but seeing it come to the big screen and all of a sudden he's the household name now, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure on the comic side that's affected the numbers,
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean,
And-
I read more Iron Man comics now than I normally would.
Absolutely, same here. And you had that with Guardians of the Galaxy. I never even dreamed of looking at a Guardians of the Galaxy book until the movie hit.
Yeah, this is like a
And-
garbage team.
Yeah. This is this is like the throwaway comic. Like,
And now they're
leave it by
switching
the
between so many
toilet,
different characters in their lineup over and over again.
yeah, but I mean, it's kind of opened new doors on
Yeah.
the print side, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a healthy balance there, is what I'm trying to say, on the creative capital on both sides, and they feed each other, and I think they're both important to one another. All the big storylines that are such massive hits right now in the Marvel, pantheon, Marvel Cinematic Universe, all came from, they weren't created by movie studios,
No.
movie studio writers. They came, directly from the print. These were like big event stories, brought to the big screen. So on the DC side, I don't think we're seeing that balance.
No, it definitely seems very much like it's out of balance. Like one's not feeding the other, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It seems like they're both happy to be their own separate entities.
Yep.
And maybe it's just they're not as good at marketing it. Like there was a big push when Superman Batman came out. I don't know if you remember when they tried to do crossovers with the comics, and it never really felt like it was it never really connected.
It wasn't organic.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it just felt very manufactured.
It's like, oh, hey, look, this is the new book, and also look at that advertisement for the movie that they're making.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like here's buy the movie and the comic and the shirt, and
Yep.
the hat, and,
Merchandising.
the merchandising.
So where does it go from here, do you think? Like, do you, the comic industry as a whole, I mean, I've had some conversations with some people, I'm not going to name names and put them out there on TV and stuff, but,
Dan.
I've had people who are in
Dan.
our industry tell me that they think comics are dying on the vine.
I think that we've seen, without naming names, there are a couple comic shops. Steve.
Sorry.
There are a couple shops that have decided to get out of new comics
Yeah.
Yep.
altogether,
Right.
or at very least just get rid of DC, because they already have the systems in place for Marvel.
Yep.
So they'll keep providing the service to the Marvel and independent customers, but they can't be bothered. Which ultimately it's it's the readers, it ends up being the customers who lose out in this.
Yep.
Now, as you stated, DC Comics played a significant role in the total amount of like properties we see out there, with Marvel being the front runner.
Sure.
Diamond used to control all of that, and now a large chunk of the properties that they published is now gone. What effects do you think that's going to have on Diamond, and do you think that's going to outwardly affect all the other properties that Diamond publishes continually?
I mean, you can't lose like 30% of your business and like not have that affect your operation.
So how is that going to affect Diamond and the rest of the comic world?
I think it's yet to be seen, but I certainly think that one of the things we could see is that we are probably going to see the price point of comics go up even higher. I mean, we were $2.99 for a long time. They held the line there for as long as they could. We saw $3.99 comics, $4.99 for like sort of like the big
prestige format
thick
type
books.
stuff.
I think more and more we'll start seeing like these, I don't know, like premium format books being printed out, and we're going to be paying $5 a comic, which at some point is just going to dissuade people from getting into the industry because the point of entry is going to be too high, and that's what I fear. I have no problem with having two companies, competing, but this wasn't like a breakup of a monopoly. Everyone, there was a lot of talk about like this is good for the industry. Diamond's no longer going to have a monopoly on the publishing. It's going to be now like you have options, but you don't have options. It used to be Diamond was the only place to go for everything. Now Diamond's the place to go for Marvel, other companies, the place to go for DC. You still only have one option. It's just now that you have one option for DC, one option for Marvel. There's no real competition going on between them for them to lower their prices.
Right.
So
we have multiple monopolies instead of just one.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of having a single monopoly, now we have two monopolies. You haven't broken up a monopoly, you've created more of them.
Yeah.
Right.
So this hasn't helped in that aspect as far as driving up healthy competition, which is what you'd want to see. You'd want to see another distributor come in and say like, hey, we're going to carry the same things as Diamond, and we're really going to drive competition in the distribution chain.
Right.
And that's just not what's going to happen. So, if you're losing money, your operation costs have to remain more or less the same. They're not going to be able to sell as much in volume in order to cover the lower margins. Ultimately, that money's going to have to come from somewhere, and it's probably going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be the consumer.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see less books published in the future? Maybe a narrowing of the monthly periodicals?
I actually believe that we'll probably get more.
Yeah, try to make up by adding more storylines.
Just more volume, yeah.
Diamond's going to have all of these machines not running DC Comics anymore, so got to fill that with something unless they want to sell it all off.
I think Diamond is not. They're not printing the books. They're
I didn't mean
right.
like,
Yeah, but in that sense, yeah.
I mean, it's like as a business.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it all, but I think we haven't mentioned so much the indies here, and how there's a fair number of books coming out from independent publishers that one would think would be propping up the industry a little bit more. I mean, Netflix has been a very big buyer of IPs coming from independent comics.
Yeah. And
so, hopefully we see that continue to drive creativity and keep the print industry going, even outside of the big two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think prior to this, like, Image was sort of like the only real big player in the independent publication, but now we've seen like a lot of really good stuff coming out of Boom Studios.
Yep.
They've had quite a few titles that have really gained a lot of popularity. Dark Horse still is like working with their IP, like their other IP. They have like the Stranger Things IP. They just like Stranger Things just had a comic come out, and they've been able to leverage some of that stuff in order to keep independent comics still churning.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see more out of independent comics, but I still would go out and say that 90% of the people that come into a comic shop, like off the street, probably looking for something that along the lines of like, Spider-Man or Batman.
Yeah, they're looking for a household name.
They're looking for something that they know, and then they're not coming in and be like, hey, do you have like the latest issue of We Only Find Them When They're Dead? Or, something's killing the children. It's like...
That's true.
And
something I don't often hear.
Yeah. It brings it back to the price point, These books that people don't know to trust, that might actually be really good storylines, they're priced the same level as the books that they do know.
Sure.
So for someone who's not like a diehard comic fan, it might be a little bit more difficult to like want to go into exploring independent comics when you only have so much money to spend
Sure.
on your comic books.
That's right.
You know,
Yep.
if comics were closer to like, God willing, like $1
Yep.
a book,
Yeah.
then you might spend $5 and get a few independents.
Take a few more
you
risks.
know, take a few more risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
at $4 a book and rising, it gets
Expensive.
Yeah.
It becomes a pretty expensive hobby.
Absolutely.
Which is sort of like it's funny how far it's come, right? You used to be able to just like, buy comics with the spare change at the you
Yeah.
had at the
Yeah.
store.
you go
and-
pick up, bread and milk, and
anymore.
it's like, I got a
I
dollar
got
left,
20
I'll grab a
cents.
couple-
Yeah, I
grab a couple of
comics
books.
on the
Yeah.
rack. That don't happen anymore.
Well, this was a very interesting discussion. I think there's a lot more to be discovered as we go forward. Obviously, DC has set their path. Marvel has got their game going. So hopefully we're going to be doing comic videos for a long time to come. I think we will. So don't worry, folks.
Whether it's print or digital or whatever.
Whatever form it may
Whatever
be,
form it'll take.
we still remain fans. So we'll keep on bringing you the best. So anyway, we appreciate you watching as always, and we'll hopefully you tune in again soon, monthly as it were. And yeah, so keep it tuned to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and show us some love. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Let's hope it's monthly. See you next year, everyone.